All right, well, we have just bumped up over the hour. We're a goodly number of you that have come in. We are encouraging everyone to use the questions pod throughout this webinar. Even if we don't answer them immediately, we will circle back as best we can to answer any of the questions or respond to the comments that we see there in the questions feature. So do look for that functionality. That is your really the only way to communicate with us. We are not monitoring the chat at all in this webinar, and the questions pod just we found has worked a lot better for us, especially when it comes to getting back to people. So find that functionality, drop in your questions throughout, and on occasion we'll stop and see what's in there and see if we can respond to you more personally. My name is David Shankconnect. I'll be the webinar host today. Really pleased to have with us once again Wendy Claire Berry, editor and formation specialist from Church Publishing Incorporated. I'll be turning things over to her a little bit more formally here in a little bit. Hopefully you see my screen, Journey to Adulthood. I do want you to respond to me throughout, because I'll be switching back and forth between this PowerPoint and the live presentation of the webinar. So we'll be going live onto the site a couple different occasions during the course of this webinar. So I like to make sure I'm staying connected with you all, and you use that questions function to respond to me as best as you can. I really would like to find out who is with us today. So I'm going to put up a couple of polls that hopefully you'll have a chance to see and respond to. We'll see how this works here. First of all, how familiar are you with the J2A curricula? Do you see a poll in front of you right now? How often have you used all three modules often? Maybe you've just used Write 13, or have just used J2A, or have used YAC as it was called in the past, and now it's called Forward. So it looks like we've got a number of responses coming up here. Thank you very much for that. Wendy, well over 60% of the people in the webinar here are brand new to J2A. So we definitely, yeah, that's really great. 9% have used all three modules, 26% Write 13, 22% J2A, and 4% used YAC. So thank you very much for that response. But a lot of newcomers to J2A with us right now. I'm also going to ask another question. What is your role as it relates to J2A? Are you a clergy person? Are you a Christian education professional? Are you a lay education leader and or teacher? Or are you a mysterious other? We'll have to find out who that other is among us. So Wendy, it looks like we're almost in thirds here. 26% about 25% clergy person, 32% Christian education professionals, but the lay Christian education leaders and or teachers are ruling the webinar here at 44%. So so we've got a lot of lay leaders with us one more time. And this is the next polling pod, and this is just because of our curiosity, and you've already started to pique that curiosity because you're asking about the on-demand version. Is this one? How many live J2A webinars have you attended? Is this your first live J2A webinar? Is there anybody who was at the previous one? Is there anyone among us who maybe would have liked to have been to the first webinar but caught it on the on-demand version? All right, so we have a few webinar repeaters here with us also, Wendy. We have 4% that say this is my second, but 93% of you this is your first. So it's really interesting. No, oh wait, well, looks like the math says 4% did find the on-demand version. So a few folks were able to find that on-demand version and take that in. So thank you Thank you very much for that. All right, I'm going to close that poll, and I'm really going to turn things over to Wendy Claire Berry at this time. Wendy, you've been deeply involved in the transition of J2A into what it is right now. Hopefully you see that my screen has changed. I always like some affirmation about that. And Wendy, I'll turn this over to you now.
Sure. So I just wanted to say thank you for coming. I am the Christian Information Specialist at Church Publishing, and it's been my privilege to be the editor for this newly revised and fully updated version of Journey to Adulthood, along with a team from St. Philip's, the content creators, St. Philip's Episcopal Church in Durham, North Carolina. And since some of you have been to an earlier webinar, what you'll hear at the beginning is probably a repeat, but then we're going to move on to some different and more focused things. So Journey to Adulthood is a youth ministry program of spiritual formation for 6th through 12th grades. It is centered on inclusive relational ministry. It uses Bible study, spiritual practices, service to the church and the community, and rites of passage, famously, rites of passage. It's creative, developmentally appropriate, and the lessons are arranged within 3 categories of self, society, and spirituality, corresponding to the biblical call to love God and to love our neighbors as ourselves. There are 3 two-year segments included in the program, and you'll notice that the age span is actually over 7 years, but there's plenty of material, let me assure you. Right 13 is generally for 11 to 13-year-olds. J2A is for 13 to 15-year-olds, and Forward is usually 15 to 18-year-olds. Forward replaces YAC, Young Adults in the Church, and it's important to note that YAC was previously a framework for creating your own curriculum, whereas Forward is actual curriculum, written lessons, lots of material for you. Why have people used Journey to Adulthood? It's comprehensive, it's developmentally appropriate, it's theologically robust, and it's highly adaptable. And it's worth noting for those of you who are new to this program that J2A was first developed in the 1990s and published in the late 90s. And I was an end user of it back in the day, about 20 years ago. I both led a J2A program and taught Right 13. So I've had the experience that you're having now. Let's move to the next slide, David. I want to talk about what each level of the program offers. Right 13 is a 2-year cohort for ages 11 to 13. It uses serious and fun activities, reflection, and discussion. It creates a safe haven to explore new ideas, new interests, and new abilities. It introduces Bible study, prayer practices, and service projects. And it includes the Right 13 ceremony, which is now fully inclusive of all gender identities. J2A, the middle level of the program, is a 2-year cohort for ages 13 to 15. It helps youth develop critical thinking skills and take on increased responsibility in the church and in their lives. It fosters the creation and understanding of Christian community. It introduces new modes of engaging with scripture and prayer, and it culminates in the pilgrimage experience. Forward, as I mentioned, replaces Young Adults in the Church, YAC. It's a 2-year mentor-based cohort for ages 15 to 18. It has an emphasis on discernment, vocation, and the development of a personal credo. It has robust and open-ended Bible studies. There are 4 of them at the moment, taking on an entire chapter of the Bible. It has a focus on greater responsibilities and service to the church and the community. And it includes a mission trip, lesson on The lessons on missions at all levels of the curriculum uses language that reflects a new understanding of mission as recognizing that God is already at work at communities and in the lives of people who we are privileged to walk alongside. And it concludes with the forward liturgy at the end of the program, which is a kind of sending forth as these young adults move on to college and their first jobs. And they may be continuing with this congregation where they have been members, but they may also be moving on to new congregations where their new lives are taking them. We think this format is especially useful right now. It gives immediate access to all 3 levels of the curriculum, including all Year 1 lessons and leader guides for your entire team. You have the ability to preview and download lessons, and most lessons translate well to remote, hybrid, and in-person learning. We're going to be looking specifically at the online scheduling tools for directors and for leaders as well. I think, David, this is where we're going to pause for a moment before we go live, and you are going to give us a high-level overview of what's available online.
Exactly, Wendy. But before I do want to go to the questions pod here and see if there are any questions that maybe we could handle at this point before we go any further. Lee asked, what happened to sexuality?
So that's a great question. So sexuality was one of the S's with self-society and spirituality. And it was removed in this iteration in part because when this program first developed in the 90s, there were very few places that were where kids were getting helpful sexual education, sex education. And now that's really built into what our kids are getting in school. And there's also an incredibly robust program in the Episcopal Church called These Are Our Bodies, which is a curriculum that goes from preschool through young adults, which is much more comprehensive than anything that we've been able to address in the scope of this program. However, there are 3 new sexuality lessons in the J2A program itself, the middle level, and those are written by some of the authors of the curriculum, These Are Our Bodies. Those lessons are on sexuality, gender, and consent.
Wendy, Rowan asks, do you start a new cohort each year, or do you keep all the 11 to 13-year-olds together and do a godly play-like spiral curriculum?
So that's up to you. That this was designed as a cohort model, and I should say that plenty of churches do use it that way. However, there are other churches that use a grade-based program so that all your 6th and 7th graders are in Rite 13, and you're, and you move up that way. I would encourage everyone to add students as you go if that's necessary. The beauty of a cohort model is that these kids will stay together through all 6 years of the program, but that's not always achievable, and it doesn't have to be achieved right away. One of the goals for this is that we will be adding new material every year, and something that's already on the schedule to be added for next year are lessons that bridge godly play or catechesis of the Good Shepherd and Rite 13, because that's important for us. St. Philip's, who developed this curriculum, uses catechesis of the Good Shepherd, and you can tell that this the kids with that Montessori religious education will really thrive in this kind of program that also invites wonder and questions and the kids' own experiences. I don't think there's any reason that you couldn't use this as a spiral curriculum, and there will be there's more information about the different ways that the cohort model works in the leader guides. And I'm happy to talk more about that offline. It's something too that I think comes up later as we talk more about planning your year, because that's a decision you'll want to make. If you started a Right 13 cohort, you might decide in the first year that you're going to invite 6th and 7th graders, but after that, it might close to 6th graders. You might keep your 5th and 6th graders together during the second year of Right 13, which then becomes 6th or 7th and 8th graders. So there are just a variety of ways, and lots of people who've done this before, who have experience they can share.
Well, very good. I've got one more, and then we probably ought to get going, Wendy. And this actually leans into some of the things that I'm going to be talking about, I think. Bailey is asking about how big of a team, how dedicated of a team do you need to gather to run a J2A program? And one of the things I guess I want to say before we go live onto the site is that the way J2A is made available now makes your team functionality more efficient than ever. But do you want to respond to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, it depends a lot on the size of your church and how many kids are in your program. Safe Church dictates that we always need at least 2 adults with any group of youth at all times. And if you have more kids, you'll need more adults. You may also have adults that can't commit to every week, and that's really fine. The beauty of this program, and we'll talk more about this, is that it's designed to bring kids into a more intentional and deeper relationship with other adults of all ages in your faith community. So there's no reason that you shouldn't have more adults in the mix if that's helpful to you. However, in the redesign, St. Philip's paid close attention to wanting to make this accessible for small churches and who don't have, a lot of paid staff and don't have a lot of volunteers to run a program. So it really is adaptable as long as you have 2 adults with every age group. That's the only really important part.
Great, Wendy, thank you. So right now we are going to go live onto the Journey to Adulthood platform, where the content is loaded for the first year and is being edited and will be uploaded progressively as we move year after year. Is that correct, Wendy?
Right. The year 2 lessons will be added next spring, at least by April. And every year, the plan is that we will be meeting with St. Philip's and a group of end users to discuss what's needed and what needs to be updated and what lessons that people would like to see. So those lessons will be uploaded later in the year as well.
Well, we at 1517 Media, Augsburg Portraits, are really pleased to partner with Wendy and Church Publishing and presenting to you Journey to Adulthood. Hopefully you see a new screen in front of you. We are actually live now on the Journey to Adulthood site. The kind of landing page here gives a brief introduction, gives folks the opportunity to register for a 14-day free trial, which is always a good thing to do after attending a webinar. If you haven't already been onto the site, you can jump on with some of this fresh information and explore it as we have presented it to you. And there's the opportunity also to have a limited number of downloads as a result of that free trial. If you just are saying, I'm convinced I want Journey to Adulthood right now, you can go to the landing page and subscribe. I'm already a subscriber, so I'm going to sign in to the Journey to Adulthood platform. And hopefully you will see that your screen changed somewhat We do have 3 tiles for the first year of Right 13, Journey to Adulthood, and Forward. I'm going to cover a very high-level review of these, of this format, and Wendy will be digging into it a little bit more as we go live onto the site for a second time to talk about the lessons and the planning. So here we are. Everything's clickable. You can take a quick look at any of these tiles to see what this curriculum is. You can download a scope and sequence. You can click that, scope and sequence, and it downloads it right into your tray. So that is another way to dig into the items. So that's that quick look.
I just wanted to point out about the scope and sequence is that we discovered that it counts as a lesson. So if you want, you can download it from the church publishing website. You can get all 6 years of the scope and sequence in one document and save your free downloads for the trial for lessons.
Yes, that's fabulous tip there. Thank you, Wendy.
Sure.
The other thing you can do is you can explore more deeply. This is all the year 1 resources to Journey to Adulthood, plus some other lessons and extras. The core curriculum here are the tiles in the top row, the progressive units. If I hit explore again, you'll see those 3 lessons: spirituality, society, and self. If you want to dig into those a little bit deeper, you click the arrow and you can see that you're given some additional functions. You find out what kind of document this is. You can hit the little eye there and preview the document. You can immediately download the document, or you can add it to the calendar. That is a really useful function when it comes to this platform for Journey to Adulthood, and Wendy will be talking about some of the advantages of that flexibility here in a little bit. If you find yourself in a deep hole of Journey to Adulthood and you want to go back to the home page, you can always click the Journey to Adulthood logo in the upper left-hand corner, and that will take you back to the home page. I do want to walk through some of these tabs here also in this first pass, including the planner. You can, in the Journey to Adulthood platform, plan a set of lessons. For example, if you wanted to do a set of Advent lessons, you could plan Advent, and let's say you want to meet with the students on certain days in Advent. Oh, excuse me, certain days in Advent. So we can go to December, and let's say we want to meet for 4 consecutive Wednesdays. You can then say, we are going to create a plan now that we are going to be adding lessons to for this period of time. You can do it for Lent, you can do it for the entire year, you can do it for years to come. You can do your lesson planning far in advance to whatever span you choose to plan lessons to by way of the planner. Once you've added lessons to a plan, it appears in the calendar. So I'm going to go to the calendar function now, and these are some lessons that have been added to a particular day. As I mentioned before, you can hit the calendar tool for each of the lessons and apply that lesson to a particular day. And there's some additional functions in this calendar that we'll be talking about a little bit later. I do want to talk about the My Account tab, because that's really important too. This is where you add your leaders. This is one of the wonderful features of Journey to Adulthood, is that it's not just for the director. You can add as many leaders as you want to Journey to Adulthood. pastors, lay teachers, even if they haven't taught for a while, maybe you want to give them access and get them a little excited about this. You can add as many of your Christian education leaders and teachers as you want. You simply provide a first name, a last name, an email, maybe a generic password, something that's really, really simple that you can all remember easily. That's what we do recommend on occasion, so you don't have to do a lot of password management. But then you assign them to various lessons in J2A, and you can assign them as a director, someone who has the ability to use the planning tool to schedule lessons and to schedule people, or as a leader, someone who has the ability to go to the calendar and to get the lesson material that they need to use for a particular period of time or a particular day. So that's one of the very useful aspects of the leader management portion of Journey to Adulthood platform. There's also some information about your subscription that you might need to keep track of, especially as leaders come and go. It's always good to know, what the core information is about your subscription. And one of the most useful features, I think, under my account are the ability to track downloads, to make sure your teachers are downloading the materials that they actually need to lead their lesson. And so you can go into the download and you can keep track of who's downloading what, when, and that way everybody can be literally on the same page. So again, leaders have online 24/7 access to this content that they will be using in all the different levels of J2A. Wendy, I'm going to stop for just a little bit, and we're going to, because I'm going to go back to the presentation here. And in the meantime, I think it's probably good for us to respond to some of the questions that we have so far. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm scrolling back. Will our church's subscription include user accounts for each youth advisor? I think I kind of hopefully answered that, Brad, for you. You can add as many leaders and directors as you want for each subscription. There's no limit to that. So Hannah is asking, if I lost it for a second there, hold on a second. My goal is to use J2A as a spiral curriculum for a confirmation class. Would the curriculum for next year, as it stands, work as year A/year B model, where the kids get all the information, just sometimes in a different order? Hopefully you can.
Sure.
Yeah.
So right 13 is the most sequential of the three levels, and that's in part because of the way it was written. It had a separate author, but it's also because that seems to be the most developmentally appropriate way for faith formation for that particular age group. There's still a lot of flexibility within that, but both J2A and Forward, while there's a scope and sequence, they do not require you to use them in exactly that order. There's a document that will go live in the next few weeks, I think, called Confirmation and Journey to Adulthood. That's worth another conversation probably, and I'm happy to talk more about that if anyone wants to, or talk offline. Obviously, this has much more material than most people would ever need in a confirmation class, and it's missing a couple of key lessons that we may develop over time. It does not have anything about the polity of the Episcopal Church, because we're aware that other denominations will use this curriculum, do and have used this curriculum. And there also isn't, while there's some lessons that address church history, there isn't one that sort of covers church history in the same way that you might want to do that for confirmation. But there are lots and lots of lessons that lend themselves very well to preparing confirmands. I hope
Fabulous.
that helps.
Yeah, and I'm having heard you say that just now. I mean, that's one of the genius having J2A in this curriculum is because it is something you can continually add content to. I mean,
right.
especially the bonus lesson areas and what have you. Those are real wild card tiles for you all. And so the question, where are year 2 resources? Correct me if I'm wrong, but they are being developed. And
so year 2 has not been uploaded yet. If you have particular questions about year 2 lessons, you can certainly see the scope and sequence. The lessons have all been written. They've all been edited. There are a few that are in the process of revision, but it was never intended for them to be available immediately because this is an annual subscription, and you'll get them before if you subscribe now, you'll get the year 2 lessons in the spring. But yes, happy to answer any questions about year 2 if you have specific questions after taking a look at the scope and sequence, or if you need to see a particular lesson, let me know, email me. I do have them all.
There is some technical concerns that I don't think we're really going to answer in the course of this webinar about accounts being used by different churches and what have you. We will circle back to you, because if you're having a tough time getting into a J2A account, it might be because there's already an email there that is being used by someone else, and so we'll need to get you to web help. Can't really troubleshoot that with you here and now, but Deborah, we will help you out.
It's probably also helpful to say that if you subscribed to Journey to Adulthood when it was being published by Leader Resources, we don't have any access to those accounts. Leader Resources stopped selling Journey to Adulthood last winter in anticipation of this new version going out. If that's a particular issue for you, then you would have to reach out to Leader Resources. But okay, those materials, as far as I know, are no longer available.
All right. Well, Wendy, I'm going to turn this over to you for the next few slides, and then we'll dig into that planner a little bit more in those lessons.
Right, and we're going to look at lessons. So just wanted to recap that this is a comprehensive program of faith formation that's deeply relational. It's designed to help youth connect with each other, with faithful adults of all ages in your congregation, and with the community at large. It actively engages youth in the life of the congregation, in worship and fellowship and service, and it's easily arranged around the events of the liturgical year. So, if you're wondering about whether you should wade in slowly or dive into the deep end, let me assure you, you can start slowly. You don't have to tell anyone you're launching a new curriculum. You can try out some lessons and then let people know that this is something new. But you can also make a big splash if you want to. This is at one point, this was the most widely used curriculum in all of the Episcopal Church. And we're just thrilled that we have a new, really up-to-date version to introduce to you. So if you want to make a big splash, you're more than welcome to. I think it's important to let everyone know what's coming, that there are milestones and rites of passage, events that everyone looks forward to. The Rite 13 ceremony, that's usually at the end of the second year of Rite 13, and most churches have a big party in connection with that. The J2A Urban Rural Adventure is usually at the end of the first year of the program of that level, and the pilgrimage is usually at the end of the second year of J2A. And in Forward, the young adults plan and execute a mission trip. At the end of Forward, there's a sending liturgy as they go off to college or their first jobs, or perhaps they're going to just be launched into new ways of leading in your own congregation. So the overarching shape of the curriculum works in this way. The first year provides a foundation that the second year builds upon. As I mentioned, that's more true of Right 13 than it is for the other three programs. It's the most sequential by its design and by the developmental needs of 11 to 13-year-olds. J2A and Forward both provide more flexibility depending on the needs and interests of your particular group. There are suggestions about which lessons and units fit well within the liturgical year and which lessons should precede other lessons found in the scope and sequence. And the lessons themselves tell you when there's information that you need that's in an earlier lesson. It will name that lesson and you can go and find it. And because you have access to all three levels, you can download that and you have that background material. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about planning with the church year. The calendar is your friend. And I'm speaking about the online calendar, but also the academic calendar and the liturgical calendar. Both of these matter. The lessons and Journey to Adulthood can and do support both. And we're going to look now at the planner on the website. And then we'll go into a couple of lessons that actually deal with the liturgical year.
Yes, we are. I'm going to hit the Journey to the Adulthood logo in the upper left-hand corner, go back to the home page. Wendy, I believe we have a couple of lessons in particular that we would want to take a look at here in this webinar, especially if we're doing some October planning of this year.
Right.
And you're suggesting that maybe something out of Unit 4 would be helpful.
Yes. There actually is a lesson called the Church Year. And when you click on that lesson and download it, or you go, well, first you can show us the preview, David, I guess, if that's helpful. That gives you a small view if you just want to look and see what's there. If you download the lesson, one of the first things that you'll learn about the lesson is that it explores the liturgical year, and it's well suited to the start of Advent if you wanted, when the circle of the church year begins, but it's also very appropriate for the beginning of the school and program year. And it tells you right up front that activity A is best done with the lesson, but activity B might be used later. David, I want to talk about the different parts of the lesson.
Sure.
We'll take a look at the lessons. So each lesson has the goals right up front and some background, which is for the leader. All the lessons are for the leaders. In some lessons, there are handouts that come in toward the end of the lesson, but the lessons are intended for the leader and give the leader everything that's needed to execute the lesson. There's following the background. There's a box that tells what will work well online. Activity B will work well online. Activity A, it seems to suggest will not, but we'll take a look at that. And then there are the talking points for the leader that to ask the group. What are some of our national holidays? Actually, can we go back to the background? So this is telling us that Christians have celebrated moments in the life of Christ and in the life of the church through the lens of annual events, and talk about marking sacred time. But it also talks about the Episcopal Church and the Roman Catholic Church have holy days throughout the church year, but in other denominations, they really were more focused on Christmas and Easter. But since we continue to be a society that marks time with the calendar, do you want to scroll down, David? And holidays, it also is, pointing out that there are particular times that you might want to focus on. Perhaps your church does something great around the Feast of St. Francis, which is celebrated on October 4th every year, and some churches do something special on the Sunday or the Saturday that's closest to October 4th. And some churches have a day of service for the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. January 15th, and the Monday holiday that we all have off of school and work is the Monday closest to that day. So for the talking point, it's asking, you know, some questions about how kids observe holidays. Which are their favorites? What special traditions their families have? What are some of the lesser known feasts that they can think of, and ask them what season of the church year we're in now, which is, you know, always a fun one to ask. There'll be some kids that will have that at the tip of their tongue, and other kids are saying, what do you mean we have the season of the church year? And you can see too that while this is a journey to adulthood lesson, it's easily adaptable to Right 13 or to Forward if this is information that you want to cover with another age group. David, would you like to scroll down? So the talking points can be a lesson in and of themselves. Each activity has a time that right up front, it says how long this activity will likely take. And because this activity is basically involves an art project, it was not recommended to do online. But it tells you in the prep section what's needed. It tells you what supplies you'll want. It asks you to print out a large copy of the church year as a colored wheel that youth can copy from. You can find one online at myfaithmylife.org, Jennifer Gamber's terrific site. It also says that if you use Catechesis of the Good Shepherd or Godly Play for your children's formation, bring in the calendar or wall hanging as a model. If you'll scroll down, the next section is Engage. It tells you what you're going to do in this activity. That's actually the different steps of introducing the activity to the youth. And this is going to have them make a calendar first for the church year, and then it's going to have an overlay of their own personal year. So David, if you want to scroll down a little further, that's why this activity isn't recommended for online. It involves paper plates and scissors and markers and that kind of thing. If you scroll down a little bit more, the last section of each activity is a reflection. It asks questions of the youth to bring the lesson to some closure. This obviously is talking about the annual rhythms of the year. And in each lesson also has a closing. Each activity has a closing prayer. Most of them are from the Book of Common Prayer. Most of them have been rewritten and adapted for inclusive language. This one is asking you to read the collect for the particular week you are giving this lesson from the Book of Common Prayer. If you are in a denomination other than the Episcopal Church, this will be whatever worship resource your church uses. Wherever it says Book of Common Prayer, BCP, that's just for you to use whatever resource your church uses instead for worship. So the next lesson, if you keep scrolling, the next activity B, this one's great for online. This adapts easily. It uses the Episcopal Church's lesser feasts and fasts, and says if you're in a different denomination, there might be an analogous resource for you. Prep always tells the leader what they need to do in advance of the lesson. And Lesser Feasts and Fasts is available online, free. So you can find that if you don't have a copy of the book. Again, it goes through all the different stages. We don't need to look at that in depth. You can just scroll down, engage, reflect. There's a closing prayer that's been adapted. And that's that lesson that's actually specific to the church year.
Well, it sounds, Wendy, that this is a lesson that could be stretched over a few.
It absolutely could. So in the scope and sequence, it says that this can be easily done over 2 to 3 weeks. And for the purposes of our little experiment here, David, I'd like you to add it to the calendar. And I don't want you to start on October the 3rd because that's the Sunday closest to the Feast of St. Francis. And I'm just going to pretend that your church is doing something fabulous that day. So you can have that lesson appear for 3 Sundays. You can do the talking points the first week. You can do the activity the second week. And then this time, let's say, even though we know activity B can be used at a different time of year, we're going to say, let's use that on the 24th.
Well, I'm going to go to the calendar now and go to October. And there's those lessons that we just added to the calendar. And what's beautiful about this is that you can work with these lessons a little bit. And if you've added your leaders ahead of time, you can actually assign leaders to each of these lessons. So maybe you have a different person leading each Sunday. You can pick that leader from your list of leaders. You can add them, save that, and they are already then connected to that lesson, and they know that that's the lesson that they're supposed to be teaching that day. And so they'll be looking for those resources to use. And so you can do that for every lesson individually. In fact, I went and pre-added members of your team, Wendy, to each of these lessons.
That's great.
Hopefully they're going to do a good job.
Yes, no doubt, no doubt.
So
Anita's our marketing manager, and Ryan is our production editor. they'll be thrilled.
Yeah.
But you can see that we pre-populated this with the lesson for the Communion of Saints, which is a forward lesson. But we pre-populated it for Sunday, October 31st, because that's the week before All Saints Day. Your church will probably celebrate All Saints Day on the first Sunday in November, so actually not that Sunday, but the following Sunday. But this way the kids will know what's coming up, and we can just take a quick peek at that lesson, because this is another one that can be adapted to any other ages. It is a forward lesson, but very easily adaptable.
Yeah, sorry to speak over you there for a little bit, but if I'm assigned for that, although it looks like you're assigned for that, Wendy, that'll work too.
Yeah, great.
You as a leader
That's always the way.
Yeah, you as the leader can go in here then and say, okay, well, I know I'm responsible for this lesson this particular day. So you look at the calendar, you look at the day, you see the download button, and you download the resources that you need to lead that lesson that day. And so your directors can set this all up ahead of time. And so now we're in that lesson.
So I just wanted to point out to you, we don't need to go all the way through this lesson, but the lesson is about the Communion of Saints, and if you scroll down to the next page, David, it will say what's needed for the lesson. It gives you online options, as you've seen. But this particular lesson, because it's a forward lesson, relies on mentors, which are a particular aspect of forward. If you're using this with another age group, you would invite other people in your congregation whom you know, who might have a story about a particular saint, or something that perhaps they've spent time in Ireland and can speak about one of the Irish saints. Perhaps they've been to Iona in Scotland on pilgrimage and want to talk about the saints associated with Scotland. Perhaps there's a modern day saint that they want to speak of. The two activities, one relies on the saints that we think of in churchy terms, and then the other activity is really about the saints in our lives, the small s saints, people we know who maybe have already died, whose lives had tremendous impacts on us, but people who are still alive, who are also can be considered saints in our lives. So I'm just pointing this out, that this is a great resource for whatever age group you're working with, if you wanted to focus on saints close to All Saints Day. Thanks, David.
Right. And so I'll go ahead and close out of this lesson then, Wendy, and return to the PowerPoint, if that's okay.
Yep.
So then I will move this over and move you ahead to the next
Yes,
slide.
thank you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about introducing Journey to Adulthood in your congregation. And the first thing is to find and train leaders. And the first thing that I would say is please do not rely on the parents of teenagers. I think particularly at this age, it's really great to have leaders who are not the parents of the kids in the program, if that's at all possible. And there's no reason that you couldn't be asking young adults who've gone through a journey to adulthood themselves, or at least their own version of journey to adulthood. There's no reason not to ask people who've never had kids or whose kids are grown. I find that people who have been through excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little. Let me take a sip of water. There are people who have maybe been involved in other areas of leadership in your church, but haven't worked with youth before. And because these lessons are so comprehensive, they don't have to have all the answers. This is really about relationship and joining youth on their journey. Please go to the, keep going. Oh, and I wanted to say, one more thing about training. Really important for all these leaders to have safe church training, whatever it is that your diocese or congregation mandates, and a background check. So here's a question that you'll want to know before you answer. Are you going to try the cohort model of keeping kids together for a 2-year cycle, or are you going to have graded classes? And are your graded classes going to be over a span of ages? So, you know, all your middle school kids together and all your high school kids together? Or do you have a large enough congregation and enough leaders that you can even have, you know, each year you can have a class, you can have a Right 13 class, 3 different Right 13 classes for, you know, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, whatever that looks like in your particular congregation. And when will you meet? Will you be online? Will you be, particularly as this fall, will you be online? Will you be hybrid and meet sometimes online and sometimes in person? Or are you able to be in person right now or soon? That's what you're going to begin planning for. These lessons, I think in the earlier edition of Journey to Adulthood, it was assumed that these were going to be happening at another time of day, Sunday afternoons or a weeknight, late afternoon, evening. But these lessons were designed for Sunday mornings and can be used over longer periods of time, particularly if you do the talking points and an activity. All right. So I just wanted to point out that this new edition is definitely fresher and more theologically up to date. That's one of the really exciting things about it. And it's grounded in the Nicene and Apostles' Creeds, all 3 levels. It has a sustained focus on the reading and study of Scripture. It uses inclusive and expansive language for God. And it has a lot of revised language and activities that reflect new understandings of mission, privilege, marginalized people, and gender.
Well, Wendy, I know that we're getting close to the hour.
Yeah.
I really want to thank people for being with us, but there are a couple of questions that we might be able to answer here, and some really good questions here. Oh, that is, we're getting deep here, Wendy.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Regarding forward, you mentioned this was a mentor-based cohort, and I'm wondering what mentor-based means to you and how churches might envision these mentorships. The 15 and 18-year group is the toughest crew to pin down, and I'm curious how others have drawn in that age group. A mentorship program is of interest to me. What would running this program look like with a small number of students?
So it's probably easiest with a small number of students, and the leader guide for Forward goes into a couple of different ways the mentor model might work. And you could choose mentors and do lessons that are focused on with the lessons that are intended for use with mentors as part of a weekend retreat. That's one of the suggestions if you didn't have mentors who were going to be available throughout the program year. There are, of course, wonderful ways for mentors to be involved in the various activities that the youth do, including the mission trip. But if you don't have that many adults who are able to commit for the long term, there are a couple of different models that are described, and that's something I'm happy to go into more detail about offline if you want to give me a call or shoot me an email.
Great. Admittedly, the author says this is kind of a lengthy question, so here goes. Really like the updated theology of missiology that was alluded to at the beginning, partnering where God is already at work as opposed to coming to a place and doing a project. Does Forward have resources to develop a cohort's own or access to an updated list of already existing alternative mission opportunities? For example, in seminary, I participated in Cristosal's global school program in El Salvador, which focused on engaging with locals already doing the work of God in their communities through conversation and visitation. But that may not work for a given cohort at their church. International travel may not be possible where the Spirit leads somewhere else. What can leaders do to go find, where can leaders go to find appropriate resources for opportunities that work with them?
Well, so that is a really great question, and the lessons about mission, and there are lessons that focus on that in Journey to Adulthood as well as Forward. I mean, in J2A as well as Forward. There's, as far as specific resources that we would recommend, there are actually some books that are recommended in the lessons for people who want to explore mission in this new context and understanding in a more in-depth way. We don't assume that you're going to go abroad for your mission opportunities. There are lots of recommendations in these lessons for finding who's already doing the work in your community and partnering with them. That's something I feel really strongly about. I happen to live in New York City, and I've been spent 30 years in children's youth and family ministries. So over the years, I have been someone who has not only led mission trips and pilgrimages, but I've also hosted a lot of Journey to Adulthood guests during either a pilgrimage or an urban rural adventure. And that's something that we always recommend is find who's already doing the work, who's already active in this way, and where you can come alongside them in your church. Where are you already in relationship with people? Because mission is ultimately about relationship with God and relationship with the people you're coming alongside, and much more so than it is, doing something for them. We really want to stress the importance of relationship and listening and understanding where they're coming from and what they're already doing. And again, I'm happy to talk more about this offline. So please, shoot me an email, give me a call. David, I think you've got my email address on one of these slides.
I think I do. Let's see if I do. If not, we can certainly circle back to all the participants with an email that includes a couple of these links that we've talked about. Suzanne wants to know, will Forward work with only 2 students?
I think it could. I absolutely think it could. I mean, critical mass is, of course, ideal for teenagers, but what if you tried Forward intergenerationally and invited these 2 students and, a small number, not an intimidating number of adults of various ages, and did these things together and really stressed that mentorship relationship. I absolutely think it could work. The Bible studies are really robust, and a lot of adults would, I think, really benefit from those. But I also think that they'd benefit from particularly like the new understanding of mission and the lessons around that. I think that this level would work very well with a mixed age group that included adults.
Well, Ashley says she's very excited about the updates around language, and says thank you very much. Mary is wondering, will this presentation be available for us to watch again? And the answer to that is yes, it will. You will be given an opportunity, actually right now, if you want, to scan your screen with your smartphone. And I believe this is what will take them, Wendy, to the site that has the first on-demand webinar. Could be curious to hear if any of you are taken to the product page by scanning that QR code with your smartphone camera. If you are, I think you're there already, at least for the first webinar, and the second one will be added to it. And everybody's asking about your email. Wendy, can I just put it in the
You may.
answer
Barrie, B-A-R-R-I-E, at cpg.org. Church Publishing is part of the Church Pension Group, so cpg.org.
W Barrie, I-E,
Yep.
at cpg.org.
And I'm going on vacation tomorrow for a few days. So if I don't get back to you right away, I'll be back in the office next Thursday.
All right. Oh, Ashley says that, got it. The scan works. Thank you for letting us know, Ashley. Really appreciate that. Very good. Well, we've 103. It's amazing how these webinars just zip right by for us. And every time we do one, we get some ideas on what to include in the next one. And so we'll be doing a couple more of these, Wendy, as I understand it.
Yes. We'll take a bit of a break now as people are getting familiar with J2A, but we'll be doing another one at some point in the next couple of months, and then more in the spring.
Terrific. Very good. Well, I believe that's all I've got. I'm sure it's not all what you have, Wendy, because I know that you could go on and on and on about J2A. But hopefully this was a great introduction, and it was a useful experience, time well spent for you all. We'll let you know when this recording is live, and we will put it where this site takes you on the Augsburg Fortress store. So with that, God's blessings to all of you. Your faith formation season has begun. We pray that the Holy Spirit will work among you and your students and your congregation to bring about a walk with God that will bless them and the world. So Wendy, do you have anything else to say in closing?
Thank you very much, David, and thank you everyone for attending.
All right, take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.